Hi, on today's episode of What's New in Data, I'm super excited to welcome our guest today, Arpit from Astoric. Arpit, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you, John. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be
Yeah,
here.
likewise. So great to have you on the pod. Would love to hear a bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So essentially, I've been working, in the data space for a few years now, but I don't really have a background in data. So I've never worked as a data analyst or a data scientist or a data engineer for that matter. My background is in product and growth, but I've always had a bent towards data, and I've been super interested in like data tools and technologies. So over the last 2 years, I would say I spent a lot of time learning about new data tools and technologies and talking to founders of a lot of data startups who are trying to basically solve different problems in the data infrastructure ecosystem. Um, so yeah, that's like a big part of what I've been doing, learning about this stuff and then writing about whatever I learn. And that has sort of led me to build what I'm building now, Asterisk, which is essentially a data community network where experts are essentially building their own communities, data practitioners and experts like yourself are building their own communities, and eventually vendors too will be able to build their own communities. So yeah.
Yeah, I've been following your online presence for a while now, and it goes without saying that you're an incredible community builder with a proven track record of getting people together to discuss data and analytics. What draws you to building communities in the data space specifically?
Yeah, great question. So basically, like again, a big part of my work over the last 4 years has been community building, and not just building communities, but actively participating in other communities and building presence in existing communities. So in my previous role, when I was heading growth at Integromat, I actually built our community from scratch. But then I also built our presence across dozens of communities where our prospects and customers hung out. I personally also contributed to a lot of communities that were run on Slack typically, and I would say spent hundreds of hours answering people's questions about tools and technologies because that's something I love doing. And community today is important. Everybody understands it, especially in the data space. I think it's extremely important because there are a lot of good communities, I would say data communities for data practitioners, but I believe there is still a lack of a broader community or a network where data practitioners and folks who work in data adjacent roles, right, like folks who work in product growth, marketing, etc., sort of come together. So there are these product and growth communities, lots and lots of them, super, active and thriving communities, and then these data communities. But there is something that connects the two, and I think that's like a gap, which I'm sure we'll talk about. So that's sort of like besides the fact that I enjoy building community and contributing to communities, I'm really passionate about sort of bridging this gap and building something that brings these two camps together. Because at the end of the day, good data infrastructure is supposed to benefit all the non-data people of the world or folks who work in data adjacent roles, right? So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, speaking of those different roles, you did recently publish a great post titled The Modern Data Divide. I'd love to dive into that a bit. Who is being divided and why? Can we bring them back together? Would love to hear about that.
Yeah, I think this is related to what I just mentioned earlier. So I see this divide between GTM teams, as in go-to-market teams, and so GTM teams on one side, and then data and engineering teams on the other, right? So DE and data and engineering teams, and GTM teams. And I feel that this divide because the modern data stack per se has resulted in a lot of great tools and technologies that have helped data folks and engineering folks improve their workflows greatly, right? It's been a boon for them. But at the same time, if you talk about the GTM folks, right, the non-data people or the data adjacent people, for them it's become extremely sort of complicated to understand, and comprehend and keep track of, what's happening in the data space, but they also understand that everything that's happening affects their work directly, right? What data is available, what data is captured, what data is made available in the tools that they use. Everything depends on the data infrastructure, the tools and technologies that organizations adopt. And with the advent of the modern data stack, everything is changing, right? Tools are changing, the way data is collected and stored and analyzed is changing. And that is having like a, I would say, like a domino effect on the like all the business teams of the world. And then this divide, right, which is, I would say, almost widening, because if you look at the data side of things, there's a lot of good stuff happening there. But again, for the non-data people, I don't see anything happening that sort of helps them get closer to the data side of the world, understand what's going on, basically like gain a better understanding of the infrastructure, how data is collected, how it is stored, what data is made available, what is the process to get data into the tools that they use, and also understanding the constraints and priorities of data teams, and vice versa for data teams to understand the priorities and constraints of GTM teams. So this is essentially like a broad divide I've been referring to.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing it more with the growth of new landscapes like data activation, for example, where data is being fed into SaaS applications used by GTM teams, but that data is being fed from the modern data stack, data warehouses. Data is becoming more universal, the use of data. Let's say that I have Salesforce in my company and I have a lead score. Some companies are starting to, calculate that lead score using smart analytics from, let's say, a job in Snowflake or BigQuery or Azure Synapse. So one of the other things you talked about is very technical data talent versus semi-technical data talent. What does that entail?
Yeah, I think, again, it sort of relates to my previous point, but I would say when we talk about data talent, typically we talk about data engineers or data analysts or data scientists or, folks who have a background working in data, who've been part of a data team, who have formal training, who obviously are good at SQL and stuff like that. There are a lot of these other people who are not exactly technical data talent, which means they're probably not qualified to be a data engineer. They may not be very good at SQL, but they still have a good understanding of data per se, like data in the sense what data looks like, where it comes from, how it is stored, how it's analyzed, right? So these are people who are, again, they might be working as part of a product or growth team, but often these people take up an ops role, they work as part of an operations team, typically rev ops or sometimes marketing ops. We've also seen product ops. So, all of these ops functions that are there at companies, and these people, their job is to really sort of, bridge the gap between the data teams and the rest of the organization. So you can think of them as bridge teams. So I think of these people as semi-technical data talent because they're definitely not non-technical, right? It's not like they don't understand anything just because they don't write code or, like I said, be proficient with SQL or Python doesn't mean they're non-technical, right? And I see myself as one of them, right? I think of myself as a technical person, right? I know SQL, but I'm no expert at SQL. And I know a lot of other things about the data infrastructure. I understand, how data is collected, how it is stored, how it's analyzed, how it's moved between systems, what are the challenges that sort of people face along the way. So yeah, that's what I mean by semi-technical data talent. And more organizations, especially the ones that are adopting a modern data stack, need to invest, need to hire, need to build semi-technical data teams. Probably not data team, but need to hire semi-technical data people, and then enable them to enable the rest of the organization to sort of become data led or data driven.
Yeah, and on other end of the spectrum, you have like, very technical people who are just computer scientists. And I remember maybe 6, 7 years ago, the only people that could do machine learning were basically PhDs who had a deep understanding of how to write the code and the algorithms at a very deep level. But now that, with the modern data stack, things have been democratized. You can just invoke machine learning functions and pass your inputs. So, I think that the growth of products that simplify and democratize data is driving this as well. But I'd love to get your take on, what are the main changes you see in the data space that are driving this transformation with these different roles?
Yeah, I think to your point, people realize that, there's, and this is again, like sort of related to the whole no code debate, right? My background is working at a company that was basically, propagating no code, right? Like Integromat, where I used to work, is a really powerful no code tool to build, like automated workflows to integrate tools as an iPaaS solution, right? If you look at the data side of things today, a lot of low code or no code tools that are available that just make life easier even for the technical data people, right? There are tools that enable people to like do things visually that they would have to do by writing, many lines of SQL, for example. So I think technology-wise, we've obviously come a long way. And today, I think we literally have tools for every problem. Today, if you have a problem, you'll probably find a tool that is solving that problem or is trying to solve that problem, right? So there's no shortage of tools and technologies. I think that is a big shift we're seeing. And people are also more open, I would say, like especially like a lot of technical people do believe in no code tools, right? Of course, they understand the constraints better than the less technical people of the world, and they understand, the limitations better, but they also see the value in it. Again, going back to my Integromat example, we had a lot of, technical people who could essentially build those integrations by writing code. We're using Integromat and saving a lot of time, right? There's no fun in reinventing the wheel. So I think that's one, like technical folks understanding the value of, tools that enable them to do stuff that they could earlier do only by writing code, right? So that is like a big shift. And also, again, the less technical people are able to do stuff that they could never do before, right? So data modeling, for example, there are tools like Trifacta that give you a really powerful visual sort of an environment to model data, transform clean data that you couldn't do without writing SQL, for example. And of course, a lot of companies still choose to write SQL, but a lot of companies spend a good amount of money on these tools to enable teams to sort of do these things on their own. And this is true for pretty much almost every layer of the data stack, right? Today, you can analyze data in product analytics tools without, writing code. And then, of course, you can activate the data in downstream systems if you understand, data structures and data models, and if you can like build the right models and sync those models with downstream tools using whatever tools you have access to. Could be CDPs, could be a reverse ETL tool or whatever. So I think from both ends, there's like more adoption for these newer tools and technologies, but we're still sort of far away from, like broader adoption, because there's still a school of thought that just believes that everything should be in code, right?
How do you think about the trade-off between like the power of more technical tools versus the simplicity, but also guardrails of the less technical low-code tools, for instance?
More technical tools can definitely achieve more, but what a lot of people forget is that not every organization needs more, right? A lot of companies they struggle to get people to use even really simple tools, I've seen organizations struggle to get people to use project management tools, right? Or documentation tools. People don't like to use tools. That's something people forget all the time, right? If you talk to 10 people and you ask them to try out a new tool, I'm pretty sure more than 5 people will refuse, right? They'll probably say, no, we're good. Or, why? They'll at least question you, like, why do we need this tool? What is wrong with our current system, right? like I'm a huge proponent of tools, right? Like if there's a tool to do something, I think it should be used. Like at least I try to use it. And everywhere I've gone, I've faced resistance. Different jobs, even in my consulting arrangements where I've sort of pitched different tools. There's a lot of resistance, right? Coming back to my original point, people don't like to use tools, or at least they don't like to change the way things are being done, right? If you give them a tool that's probably exactly like whatever they're used to, they'll probably use it. But if you want them to use something totally new and learn new technology, a lot of people are not open to it. So I think that's like a big problem, which not a lot of people realize, right? Like people love building technology, but getting technology adopted, and then getting people to consistently use those tools and derive value on a regular basis so that they continue paying for those tools is really difficult. A lot of people just have short-term use cases. So they'll use a tool, they'll pay for it, and then they'll just stop paying for it, right? So you also have to like keep educating people about use cases, right? Like, okay, you can do this also, and you can do that also with our tool. So you really need like, I think there are just literally two kinds of people. One who like to explore new tools and learn new tools and use them, and the other that doesn't.
How do you feel about using those all-in-one tools versus separate focus tools in the modern data stack?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't have first-hand experience with any of the all-in-one tools, but I definitely see the promise, right? Because again, a lot of companies firstly don't have the resources for purpose-built tools, right? They don't have the resources or the talent, right? They might have the money, but they don't have the talent to like implement 5 or 6 different tools and make sure they're implemented properly and they don't break and everything works properly, right? So that takes a decent investment. Finding people who can do this stuff properly is also hard, right? So and then again, from a use case perspective, not every company has very advanced use cases. Sometimes it's much better to cater to immediate needs and like simple use cases than to like build something that will cater to more advanced use cases that you may have in the future, right? At the cost of not fulfilling current needs, right? And I've seen this again in my past experience where like we have like I've been part of teams that have prioritized long-term use cases and sacrificed short-term sort of gains, if I can call it gains, and that is not a good strategy because at the end of the day, like you're also like the people who benefit from these all-in-one tools, right? Like they want that benefit sooner rather than later. They don't want to wait for a long time, right? They don't really care about using an all-in-one tool or like like a best-in-class, best-in-breed tool, right? They just care about the outcome. As long as the job is done, and their KPI is met, right? They're happy, right? And I mean, if I was a head of growth at an early stage company, I'd probably go for an all-in-one tool because I would focus on my KPIs and I probably wouldn't care about going after building a data stack that'll take like 6 months to build.
Yeah, what's an example of an all-in-one tool for a specific use case, if you could name one?
All-in-one tool use case. So I think there are quite a few tools on the market that are combining, basic ETL capabilities. They're providing data warehousing, managed data warehousing, and then they're also enabling you to like do some bits of reverse ETL. Some are also giving you modeling capabilities. So Mozart Data is a good example. There's a company called Y42 that is doing this. There's a company called Weld. All of these companies are doing this, and then there are a lot of other companies that are offering a managed data stack. I think Mozart Data is more like a managed data stack, right? So it's under the hood. They might be using different tools, but for the end customer, still one interface. So they get one interface, and then they get all of these different capabilities
that
they would get by buying separate tools.
Yeah, and like for example, my team, we used to use Mixpanel for all our product metrics, but over time we've evolved to use tools like Segment that just loads data into a warehouse and build the same reports from there. So I see that as like an example as well, where growth and product teams can use all-in-one tools like Mixpanel, or they can evolve into using a modern data stack in a data warehouse.
Sure. I have used Mixpanel in the past. I tried to might use Mixpanel. I wasn't thinking of Mixpanel as an all-in-one tool. Like it's basically a purpose-built product analytics tool, right? You can probably do the same analysis in the warehouse, right, using SQL, but it's tedious and it basically takes away the ability from product and growth professionals to do ad hoc analysis. So I'm a strong proponent of product analytics tools, especially for product and growth teams. These tools are really, really good, like Mixpanel or Amplitude, and there are a few more. They do the job really well, and they're pretty powerful too, as long as they're implemented properly. Companies can easily sort of like they can easily cover the cost, this whatever they spend behind these tools, and like the gain would be a lot more rather than sort of restricting people to whatever reports are built manually using SQL. Especially things like funnel analysis, etc., are pretty complicated in SQL. Like I've seen a lot of people say that, and pretty sure that's true.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things where you're trading power for simplicity. They have these in every vertical, right? There's out of the box marketing analytics tools, there's out of the box sales analytics tools, but they all kind of hit a wall at a certain point when you want to customize and do deeper, richer analytics. I see that's kind of a catalyst for companies moving to like a modern data stack. And I also love to hear, a bit about your community as Storic and why you built it and who are some of the people involved and what you're hoping to achieve with it.
I wouldn't call Asterisk a community. At least I don't want to think of it like a community, because my goal is not to really build just a community. My goal is to build a network of communities and enable experts, data practitioners, or companies, vendors to build their own communities on Asterisk. So there are two things here. Right now, there are lots of communities. Most of them are on a Slack. For the end user, it's a pretty disjointed experience to jump from one Slack community to the other. A lot of the knowledge, pretty much all of the knowledge that is shared in these communities eventually get lost. And at the end of the day, communities thrive when experts contribute to these communities, when experts answer people's questions. If you think of from an expert's point of view, at the end of the day, all their effort is sort of lost, right? All the time they spent contributing to these communities, they've got nothing to show for, which I think is not sustainable, right? And all the value that is captured is captured by the community owners. So my goal is not to build yet another community that gets a lot of people to contribute, and then I capture all of the value and try to monetize it. My goal is to build a place where anybody can build their own sort of micro community or community, and no two communities need to look the same. Today, every Slack community looks the same, right? You literally have the same, often have the same people, you have the same channels, everything's the same, right? I've seen people literally post a question in 3 or 4 Slack communities at the same time, right? I've sometimes even gone and answered some of those questions multiple times in different communities, just for the heck of it. So with Asterisk, the idea is twofold. One, experts can build their own communities and build an audience, which they can eventually leverage. They can even monetize their communities. For the end user, they're able to get answers to their questions directly from experts. They're obviously able to learn from the content these experts are curating, but also get answers to their questions directly from these people who are otherwise not very easily not easy to reach often, right? Like even if you know that, hey, John is an expert at CDC, and he probably has a pretty good answer to your question, you wouldn't know where to sort of message him. Should I reach out to him on LinkedIn? Should I, message him in this community or that community? And then, like if you don't end up seeing that message, the other person is probably, they get an impression that you're probably not interested in answering that question. So all of these dynamics are sort of at play in terms of community. And then the second aspect is vendor communities. So every vendor of data products is trying to build some form of community, and it's important to, right? Like everybody knows how important it is to invest in community building efforts. But that said, it doesn't make sense for every vendor to have like a broad community. It makes sense for vendors to have, very, very focused communities. If they want to build a community for customers or users or partners, or if they have an open source project, obviously they want to build a community of contributors. Sometimes they might want to build an interest-based community, but that has to be again, very, very focused and related to their product, right? Again, when these communities are built on Asterisk, eventually vendors can build these communities on Asterisk, then the end user has a much better experience, because then they get access to all of these different communities in one place. They can learn from experts, or they can learn from vendors directly. Vendors have a lot of knowledge shared, right? So that can happen, and then people get universal search, so they can search for content and answers across many different communities, and most importantly, all the contribution, is tied to one's profile, is searchable, so it doesn't get lost. So that's like a broad description of what I'm trying to build at Asterisk.
Yeah, and a bit of a shameless plug, but very excited on my end to start the change data capture community on Astoric. And from my perspective, obviously, my product Stream, which does change data capture and data streaming. We want a community of our users, which is, like you said, very focused on our product, but at the same time makes a ton of sense for myself to build a change data capture specific community that's broader, right? Because not everyone is using just Stream for change data capture, and there's some very conceptual things that require education. Being on the Astoric community seems like the perfect fit for that, where hey, even if you're, rolling your own change data capture, you're just thinking about change data capture, and it's not like a product or vendor specific discussion. It's great to have that Astoric as a community to do that. So definitely excited to work with you on that.
Yeah, thank you. And it makes sense for you to be building it, because you are an expert. You have a lot of knowledge, and it makes sense for you to share your knowledge in one place and enable people to learn from you. You can eventually start collaborating with other experts who are building complementary communities. So we have one about real-time analytics, which is obviously very, very closely related to CDC, right? So eventually you could collaborate with Dilith, who basically runs the real-time analytics community, and you could do stuff together. So I think the possibilities are endless when there's incentive for people to sort of contribute, and they get something in return. That incentive cannot just be gamification, or you get some points and stuff. It has to be proper real incentive, I think. So if you end up building an active community around CDC, that's your audience that you can leverage in many different ways, right? Eventually.
Yeah, absolutely. Arpit, other than yourself, who are the people to follow if I want to learn more about the latest trends in data?
Yeah, quite a few people. In fact, earlier today, I added a bunch of recommendations to my Substack. So if you go to my Substack, arpitc.substack.com, you can see I've recommended at least 7 or 8 other Substack publications, which are basically run by these individuals. So there is Ben Stansel. I think everybody knows about him and his Substack. Sarah Krasnick, she recently started her Substack, and it's pretty good. David J. Dilaki has a Substack. I follow him. There are a lot of other data newsletters. There's one called Data News, which essentially gives you all the fundraising news, and they curate some good content. There's one called Modern Data Stack.xyz, They curate a lot of, again, data news and other content. A bunch of other people. I think there's Stephen Bailey. He has a newsletter, which is really cool. DBT has a newsletter, which I think is pretty good. In fact, very good. Sometimes they often curate content, and they also have their own sort of points of view that they share.
Yeah, well, that was a great list. Totally agree. I also follow Ben Stansel and Sarah Krasnick. She writes some great stuff as well, along with the others you mentioned. As a bit of a shameless plug, Stream has launched our own newsletter that aggregates more outside content as well from folks like yourselves and others that you mentioned. But thank you for sharing that. And I just think that it's so great that one of the things that's developed over the last few years is people are more generous with their knowledge, with their earned knowledge from being experts at what they do in their experience. And people are just learning so much faster now because, you have these experts who are talking about what they've learned and getting their perspective. It's really accelerating innovation in the data space.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I would say, I'm learning every day. And I think writing whatever I'm sort of learning about is helping me learn faster, right? It's one thing to consume content, but when you actually try to sort of put it down in your own words, that's when you sort of accelerate your learning. So I in fact recommend some bit of writing to everybody, especially if you're a practitioner, if you have unique insights, you have good experience solving problems. You don't have to be a good writer. Nobody cares about good writing or fancy words. No one minds a typo or a grammatical mistake, as long as your message is strong and you have unique insights to share. So I think everybody should try writing.
Arpit, I have to comment on your background there. You have all these rock star legends there, like John Lennon and Queen, and it seems like you're a major rock music guy.
Yeah, I'm definitely a major rock music guy. I'm not a musician per se. Like you can say, I'm a wannabe musician. I could never. I obviously wanted to pursue music, but I could not do it professionally. I do play the drums, but these days I'm also making beats online. So I'm using online tools to make beats, which I'm really enjoying. Music is really important to me, and all of these people are great inspiration for me. So I've had some of these posters for more than 10 years, and I've literally taken them around and lived in more than 10 houses with some of these posters, and some of them are of course new. So in fact, now I'm trying to combine my love for music and everything I do professionally in terms of data, and launching a new YouTube show called Data Beats. So
okay.
Another shameless plug.
Love that. Yeah, great to have interests outside of data, such as rock music. But if you can find a way to combine music and data, why not? Well, Arpit, it was so good having you today on today's episode of What's New in Data. Look forward to working with you again in the future.
Thank you, John. Thanks for having me. You asked some great questions. I think this was a lot of fun, and definitely look forward to seeing you on Astrid.
Likewise, I'm super excited about it. Thank you very much, Arpit. Have a great rest of your day over there.
Thank you. You too.